If you bite me, I am leaving you in the snow, and I need you to understand that I am completely serious." Claire Bennett stood beneath the porch light of her small Colorado cabin, holding the front door open while staring at the largest wolf she had ever seen. Snow drifted through the dark pine trees beyond the yard, covering the ground in white, and the temperature had already dropped below 20 degrees. The animal sat beneath the edge of the porch roof as though it had personally decided the weather was an insult. Its thick black coat was damp with melting snow, its enormous paws planted firmly against the wooden boards, and its pale blue eyes watched Claire with an intelligence that made her uncomfortable. "You are either lost," she said, "or you have terrible judgment." The wolf blinked once. Claire folded her arms. "Do not look at me like that. You are the one standing on my porch." It had appeared less than 10 minutes earlier, emerging silently from the trees before settling near her door. Claire had lived outside Pine Haven long enough to respect wild animals, which meant she knew perfectly well that inviting a wolf into her house belonged somewhere near the top of the list of terrible ideas. Unfortunately, leaving an exhausted animal outside during the first serious snowstorm of the season also felt impossible. She stepped backward. "One night, you stay warm, you behave, and tomorrow I call someone who actually knows what to do with you." The wolf remained motionless. That was an invitation. Nothing. Claire sighed. "Fine. Freeze dramatically on someone else's porch." She began closing the door. The wolf immediately stood and walked inside. Claire stared after it. "Oh, so you do understand English." The animal ignored her and moved through the living room with the confidence of someone inspecting property it intended to purchase. It examined the fireplace, glanced toward the kitchen, then stopped beside Claire's old brown sofa. "Absolutely not," she said. The wolf looked at the sofa, then at Claire, then back at the sofa, the floor. 30 seconds later, the wolf was stretched across all 3 cushions. Claire placed both hands on her hips. "I already regret this relationship." One dark ear moved slightly. Claire found an old blanket and left it nearby, though the wolf made no effort to acknowledge the gesture. She brought a bowl of water and some leftover chicken from the refrigerator. The water received approval. The chicken received a long, deeply judgmental stare. "You are a stray wolf," Claire said. "You do not get restaurant standards." The television continued playing quietly behind her. Claire barely listened until the evening news anchor mentioned a name everyone in the Northern Territories recognized. Authorities are continuing their search for Alpha King Nathaniel Blackwood, who has now been missing for 2 days after failing to return from an inspection near the western mountain boundary. Claire turned toward the screen. A photograph showed a serious dark-haired man in a formal black coat, surrounded by officials. "That is strange," she murmured. "People like him are not supposed to disappear." Behind her, the wolf had become completely still. Claire glanced over her shoulder. Its pale blue eyes were fixed on the television. "What?" The wolf immediately turned its head away. Claire narrowed her eyes. That was suspicious. No response. She walked closer. "Do you know something about the missing Alpha King?" The wolf stared at the wall. Claire laughed softly. "Right. Of course. I am interrogating wildlife now." She switched off the television and headed toward the hallway. "Try not to destroy anything, Grumpy." The wolf's head snapped toward her. Claire stopped. "Grumpy." Its eyes narrowed. She smiled. "Oh, you hate that." The wolf released a low sound of obvious displeasure. Claire pointed at it. "Then stop acting grumpy." She disappeared into her bedroom, still smiling at her own ridiculous decision. The cabin became quiet. For several seconds, the wolf remained perfectly still. Then it slowly turned toward the dark television screen where Nathaniel Blackwood's photograph had been displayed moments earlier. The missing Alpha King stared at his own reflection in the glass, lowered his head, and seemed to understand one humiliating truth. The most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories had vanished without a trace, and the only person who had found him had just named him Grumpy. By 7 the next morning, Claire had learned 3 things about her unexpected house guest. First, Grumpy snored. Second, he somehow occupied more space than an animal his size should have been physically capable of occupying. Third, he had absolutely no intention of leaving her sofa. Claire stood in the living room holding a mug of coffee while the enormous black wolf watched her from the cushions with half-open blue eyes. "Good morning." One ear moved. "I said good morning." "Nothing." Claire took a sip. You know, most guests at least pretend to appreciate free housing. Grumpy closed his eyes. Claire stared at him. Unbelievable. She walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. The leftover chicken from the previous night remained untouched. Claire placed a bowl of ordinary dog food on the floor, stepped back, and waited. Grumpy approached, sniffed it once, then looked directly at her with an expression of personal offense. That is perfectly good food. He walked away. You were living outside yesterday. Grumpy returned to the sofa. Claire opened the refrigerator again and noticed the steak she had been saving for Friday night. She looked toward the living room. Grumpy was suddenly watching her. No, his ears lifted. Absolutely not. 5 minutes later, Claire stood beside the stove cooking the steak while questioning every decision that had brought her to this moment. This is not adoption, she informed him. This is temporary emergency shelter. Grumpy sat near the kitchen entrance, looking considerably more cooperative. And you are not getting used to this. He ate every bite. Claire pointed at the empty plate. I hope you are ashamed of yourself. He was not. Later that morning, Claire called her friend Sarah Mitchell, the local veterinarian. She carefully described the situation without mentioning that the wolf appeared to understand conversations. Sarah's response was immediate. Claire, do not treat a wild wolf like a stray Labrador. Claire looked toward the sofa. Grumpy was watching a nature documentary. I am aware of the distinction. Keep your distance and call wildlife services. At the words wildlife services, Grumpy turned his head toward Claire. I will, she said slowly. His eyes narrowed. Claire ended the call and pointed at him. Stop doing that. Grumpy looked away. She decided to clean while waiting for the snow to ease. The moment she switched on the vacuum cleaner, Grumpy rose from the sofa as if the machine had personally challenged his authority. Claire pushed it across the rug. He moved backward. She moved forward. He retreated behind a chair. Claire stopped and stared. Are you afraid of the vacuum cleaner? Grumpy stepped out immediately, standing taller. Claire smiled. You are. He gave her a deeply offended look. The mighty forest predator defeated by household appliances. Grumpy walked past her with exaggerated dignity and disappeared into the kitchen. Claire laughed for the first time in days. The sound made him stop. He looked back at her, and for one brief moment, something in his expression softened. That afternoon, Claire sat at the kitchen table working on invoices for the small bookstore she managed in Pine Haven. Grumpy lay near the fireplace, apparently asleep. If you are staying another night, she said without looking up, we need rules. One blue eye opened. No stealing my food. No taking the entire sofa. No judging me. The eye closed again. Claire smiled. And tomorrow, we find out where you belong. At that, both of his eyes opened. Claire noticed. What? Grumpy stood and walked toward the window. Outside, a dark vehicle moved slowly along the snow-covered road before disappearing behind the trees. The wolf's entire posture changed. The lazy, irritated houseguest vanished. He became alert, focused, watching the road with an intensity Claire had not seen before. Do you know that car? She asked quietly. Grumpy looked at her, then back toward the window. Claire felt the first real thread of unease since bringing him inside. She approached carefully and looked out at the empty road. Grumpy, she whispered, what exactly did I bring into my house? The wolf turned toward her. For once, his expression did not look annoyed. It looked worried. The dark vehicle did not return that night, but Claire noticed that Grumpy barely slept. Every few hours, she heard his paws moving quietly across the wooden floor before stopping near a window. By morning, the snow had weakened to a light dusting, yet the wolf remained alert. Claire carried her coffee into the living room and found him sitting beside the front door. You have been watching the road since yesterday. Grumpy looked at her. And I am beginning to think you understand every word I say. His ears shifted. Claire narrowed her eyes. Sit. Grumpy remained sitting. That proves nothing. She pointed toward the kitchen. Go stand by the refrigerator. The wolf stared at her as though refusing on principle. Interesting. Claire walked closer. If you understand me, blink twice. Grumpy did not blink at all. Claire laughed. Fine. Keep your secrets. She turned toward the kitchen. Behind her came two slow, deliberate blinks that she never saw. The rest of the morning only made things stranger. Claire discovered the back door open after she knew she had locked it. Grumpy was outside for exactly 3 minutes before returning and pushing the door closed with his nose. Later, she dropped her keys beneath the kitchen table and jokingly said, Since you are apparently living here rent-free, you could make yourself useful. Grumpy immediately retrieved them. Claire stared at the keys resting between his paws. That was not normal. He looked away. No, do not pretend you suddenly cannot hear me. Claire crouched several feet from him. What are you? Grumpy's blue eyes met hers. For one strange second, Claire felt as though she was waiting for an answer he desperately wanted to give. Her phone rang before either of them moved. It was Sarah. Wildlife Services can send someone tomorrow morning, she said. Claire looked at Grumpy. His expression changed immediately. Tomorrow. The roads are still difficult today. Claire hesitated. Sarah, have you ever heard of a wolf understanding human speech? Silence followed. How much sleep did you get last night? I am serious. Claire, wolves are intelligent, but if you tell me this one is doing your taxes, I am coming over personally. Claire glanced at the invoices scattered across the table. He would probably judge my accounting. Grumpy made a quiet sound that seemed suspiciously close to disagreement. Claire ended the call and stared at him. Did you just criticize my bookkeeping? He walked toward the fireplace. That afternoon, the television reported another update on Nathaniel Blackwood's disappearance. Search teams had expanded their efforts across the northern mountain territories. Claire watched the photograph of the missing Alpha King appear again. Grumpy, lying beside the fireplace, immediately lifted his head. There, Claire said. You keep doing that. The wolf froze. Claire lowered the television volume. Every time they mention him, you react. She sat on the edge of the sofa. Do you know Nathaniel Blackwood? Grumpy stared at her. Did you belong to him? His expression somehow became offended. Claire considered another possibility and smiled at how ridiculous it sounded. Wait, are you secretly a person trapped inside a wolf? The silence lasted too long. Claire's smile slowly faded. Grumpy continued staring at her with unmistakable intelligence. That was a joke, she said. He looked away. Claire stood. Grumpy. No response. Look at me if you understood that question. Slowly, the wolf turned his head. Claire stopped breathing for a second. You understand me. Grumpy remained still. All of it. His ears lowered slightly. Claire backed toward the kitchen counter. Not from fear, but from complete confusion. Okay, I am going to ask one question, and somehow you are going to answer yes or no. She pointed to the floor. One paw for yes. Two for no. Grumpy looked almost exhausted by the situation. Are you connected to the missing Alpha King? The wolf lifted one paw. Claire stared at him. Then she laughed nervously. Of course you are. Grumpy lowered his paw. Claire took a slow breath. Are you his wolf? Grumpy placed two paws forward. Claire's laughter disappeared. Outside, somewhere beyond the trees, an engine started. Grumpy immediately turned toward the window. Claire followed his gaze, then looked back at him. There is one question left, is there not? The wolf said nothing. Claire swallowed. Are you Nathaniel Blackwood? Before Grumpy could move, the lights inside the cabin suddenly went dark. The cabin fell silent except for the wind moving through the pine trees outside. Claire reached for her phone and switched on the flashlight. Please tell me that was just the storm. Grumpy was already standing between her and the front door, his entire posture focused on something beyond the windows. Claire looked toward the road, but darkness covered everything outside. You know what? We can continue the impossible conversation after the electricity comes back. The wolf glanced at her, then moved toward the window. Claire checked the breaker panel and discovered nothing unusual. 10 minutes later, the power returned without explanation. The road remained empty. Grumpy did not relax. Claire barely slept. When morning finally arrived, she stepped into the living room expecting to find an enormous black wolf occupying her sofa. Instead, the sofa was empty. Grumpy. No answer. Claire checked the kitchen, the porch, and the back room. Nothing. Then she heard movement near the fireplace. She turned and froze. A tall, dark-haired man stood several feet away, wrapped securely in the large spare blanket Claire kept over the back of the sofa. His blue eyes were immediately familiar. Claire grabbed the nearest object, which happened to be a wooden spoon, and pointed it toward him. Do not move. The stranger raised both hands. I was not planning to. Who are you? He hesitated. This explanation is going to sound unreasonable. There is a strange man in my cabin where a wolf was sleeping last night. We passed unreasonable about 30 seconds ago. His expression tightened with what looked suspiciously like embarrassment. Before you panic, I am Grumpy. Claire stared at him. That somehow made this worse. I assumed it might. She kept the spoon raised. Prove it. You fed me your Friday steak. Claire said nothing. You threatened to call wildlife services. You accused me of being afraid of your vacuum cleaner. You were afraid of it. I was unfamiliar with it. You hid behind a chair. That detail is irrelevant. Claire slowly lowered the spoon. The voice was unfamiliar, but the offended expression was exactly the same. She looked toward the television, then back at him. Recognition arrived all at once. Nathaniel Blackwood. He closed his eyes briefly. Yes. The missing Alpha King. Yes. The missing Alpha King has been sleeping on my sofa for 3 days. Nathaniel looked at the damaged cushion beneath him. It is not a particularly comfortable sofa. Claire pointed the spoon again. You do not get to criticize my furniture. For the first time, the corner of his mouth moved as though he was trying not to smile. Claire noticed and became even more irritated. Start explaining. Nathaniel's expression turned serious. 2 nights before you found me, I was inspecting the western boundary. Something disrupted my ability to shift back into human form. I could still think clearly, but I could not communicate, except apparently through aggressive staring. I was attempting dignity. You ate my steak. I was hungry. Claire placed the spoon on the counter. Why did you not find your own people? Because I did not know which of them I could trust. The humor disappeared from the room. Nathaniel looked toward the window. My inspection route was confidential. Someone knew exactly where I would be. Claire remembered the dark vehicle. You think someone was looking for you? I know someone was. Claire folded her arms. And now they might know you are here. Nathaniel met her eyes. Which is why I need to leave. He turned toward the hallway, then stopped. A dark vehicle was moving slowly between the trees outside. The same vehicle Claire had seen the day before. Nathaniel stepped away from the window. Claire looked at him. That is them, is it not? I do not know. That was not convincing. Nathaniel reached for his phone, then remembered he did not have one. Claire took hers from the table. Who do you trust? One person. Call them. Nathaniel looked at her carefully. Claire, if you make that call, you become part of this. She held out the phone. I adopted a missing Alpha King and named him Grumpy. I think we passed that point yesterday. Nathaniel stared at her for a moment before accepting the phone. Then he entered a number from memory. The call connected after one ring. A man answered. Nathaniel spoke only 4 words. Ethan, I am alive. Ethan did not speak for several seconds. Then his voice came through the phone, controlled but unmistakably relieved. Tell me where you are. Nathaniel looked toward Claire. She gave him the address, and he repeated it. Come alone, Nathaniel added. No council security. No official vehicles. Tell no one until you arrive. Ethan understood immediately. 2 hours. The call ended. Claire took her phone back. You know, when normal people stay at my house, I usually get more information before mysterious visitors start driving through the neighborhood. Nathaniel glanced toward the window. The dark vehicle had disappeared again. I am sorry. Claire paused. She had expected an order, not an apology. That sounded painful. I am capable of apologizing. Good. You might need practice. Nathaniel almost smiled before his expression became serious again. Claire pointed toward the blanket. Also, before your royal rescue arrives, you need actual clothes. 20 minutes later, Nathaniel emerged wearing an old gray sweatshirt and sweatpants Claire had found in a storage box left by her older brother. The sleeves were slightly short. Claire looked him over. The terrifying Alpha King of the Northern Territories. Not one word. I was going to say distinguished. You were not. She smiled despite herself. Then the questions returned. What happened during the inspection? Nathaniel sat across from her at the kitchen table. I was checking reports of unusual activity near the western boundary. My schedule changed that morning. Only a few people knew. Then something happened to your ability to shift? Yes. I became trapped in wolf form. I remained fully aware, but every attempt to shift back failed. And you came here. Nathaniel looked toward the window. I followed the forest south until I reached your property. Why my property? His answer came too slowly. I do not know. Claire noticed the hesitation, but let it go. So, technically, I adopted the Alpha King. Nathaniel gave her a flat look. You provided temporary shelter. I fed you. 1 steak. You slept on my sofa. Against my better judgment. I named you. We are never discussing that again. Claire laughed, and something in Nathaniel's guarded expression softened. For 3 days, she had spoken to him without knowing his title. She had complained about his manners, threatened him with wildlife services, and ordered him off her furniture. Strangely, Nathaniel realized those had been the most ordinary 3 days he could remember. No one had bowed. No one had asked for influence. Claire had simply opened her door because she believed an animal needed warmth. A knock came 2 hours later. Nathaniel immediately stood. Claire remained several feet behind him as he opened the door. Ethan Hayes entered, stopped, and stared at his king wearing gray sweatpants. His expression remained professional for nearly 3 seconds. "Do not," Nathaniel warned. Ethan looked away. "I did not say anything. You were about to." Claire folded her arms. "He also answers to Grumpy." Ethan slowly turned toward Nathaniel. "I said nothing," he repeated. Nathaniel closed the door. Within minutes, Ethan confirmed what Nathaniel had feared. His official inspection route had been altered in the council system less than an hour before he disappeared, and someone had accessed the confidential file afterward. "The council believes you are still missing," Ethan said. "Good," Nathaniel replied. Claire frowned. "Good." Nathaniel looked at her. "If whoever arranged this believes I am still gone, they may make another move." Ethan nodded. "Which means we can watch them." Claire understood the implication. "And what happens to me?" Nathaniel's expression changed. "You go back to your normal life." Claire glanced toward the window where the dark vehicle had appeared twice. "I'm not sure my normal life knows that yet." Ethan looked between them. "Someone has already been watching this cabin?" Nathaniel nodded. Ethan became very still. Claire felt the room grow serious. Nathaniel stepped closer, keeping a respectful distance. "Claire, you helped me when you had no reason to. I will make certain this does not become your problem." She met his eyes. "I think the people outside already made that decision for you." Before Nathaniel could answer, Ethan's phone vibrated. He read the message and looked up. "The council just announced an emergency vote for tomorrow morning." Nathaniel's face hardened. "On what?" Ethan turned the screen toward him. "Choosing an acting ruler until the Alpha King is found." Claire looked at Nathaniel. He was no longer the irritated wolf on her sofa. In an instant, the quiet cabin seemed too small for the authority in his expression. "Then someone has finally shown us what they wanted," he said. For the next hour, Claire watched 2 versions of Nathaniel Blackwood exist in the same room. One was the impossible house guest who had stolen her steak and lost an argument with a vacuum cleaner. The other was the Alpha King Ethan addressed with quiet respect as they studied the emergency council notice at her kitchen table. "Who called the vote?" Nathaniel asked. Ethan turned his phone around. "Vanessa Crowe submitted the motion. She claims the Northern Territories cannot remain without leadership while the search continues." Nathaniel leaned back. "Convenient." Claire placed fresh coffee on the table. "Who is Vanessa Crowe?" Ethan looked toward Nathaniel before answering. "Senior council member. Powerful family. Strong political support. And apparently excellent timing," Claire said. Nathaniel glanced at her. "Exactly." Ethan opened several secured records on his phone. The change to Nathaniel's inspection route had come through an authorized council account, but the digital record did not identify who had used it. The emergency vote created another problem. If Nathaniel returned publicly before understanding what had happened, whoever had manipulated the schedule could erase evidence and retreat behind political protection. "So you stay missing," Claire said. Nathaniel nodded. "For another day. And you investigate from my kitchen." "Temporarily." Claire looked around at the 3 coffee mugs, scattered papers, and Alpha King wearing her brother's old sweatshirt. "This is becoming a very unusual week." Ethan tried not to smile. Nathaniel noticed. "You may leave whenever you find this amusing." "I find nothing amusing, Your Majesty." "Liar," Claire said. Ethan looked at her with immediate approval. Nathaniel sighed. By afternoon, Ethan had arranged a secure laptop and clothes for Nathaniel without revealing his location. Claire returned to her invoices while the 2 men worked quietly. She tried not to listen, but certain names repeated often enough to become familiar. Vanessa Crowe, Councilman Mercer, Security Director Collins. People who had known pieces of Nathaniel's schedule. At one point, Ethan stepped outside to make a private call. Claire looked across the room. Nathaniel was studying a list of access records. "You trust him," she said. "With my life. But not your counsel. Trust and titles are not the same thing." Claire considered that. "Then being king sounds lonely." Nathaniel looked up. The observation seemed to catch him unprepared. Most people would call it powerful. Those things can both be true. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Nathaniel looked back at the screen. "You notice too much." Occupational hazard. You manage a bookstore. Exactly. I spend all day watching people pretend they are not judging books by their covers. That earned a quiet laugh from him. Claire smiled before remembering who he was supposed to be. You are very different when Ethan is here. How? More Alpha King. Less difficult stray. Nathaniel gave her the familiar, offended stare. There he is. Ethan returned shortly before sunset, carrying a dark coat and a sealed envelope. I found something. He placed the envelope on the table. Inside was a printed copy of Nathaniel's original inspection schedule and the altered version. Claire noticed a handwritten notation beside the new route. What does that symbol mean? Ethan leaned closer. What symbol? Claire pointed to a small mark beside the western boundary coordinates. Nathaniel frowned. Council routing code. No, Claire said. Look at the second line. The mark is different. Ethan compared the pages. Claire was right. The symbol looked almost identical, but one stroke curved in the opposite direction. Ethan immediately searched the secured records. After several minutes, his expression changed. This notation appears on only one other set of documents. Nathaniel stood. Whose? Ethan looked at him. Vanessa Crow's private scheduling office. Silence settled over the kitchen. Claire looked from Ethan to Nathaniel. That seems important. It is, Nathaniel said. Ethan closed the laptop. We still need proof that connects her directly to the alteration. Nathaniel nodded. Then we let tomorrow's vote begin. Claire stared at him. You are going back? Not immediately. His eyes shifted toward the window. First, we find out who believes they are about to inherit my throne. At that exact moment, headlights appeared between the trees. A dark vehicle stopped at the end of Claire's driveway. Ethan moved toward the window. Nathaniel remained completely still. Claire recognized the vehicle immediately. That is the same one. A moment later, the driver's door opened, and Ethan quietly said the last name Claire expected to hear. Vanessa. Vanessa Crow did not approach the cabin immediately. She remained beside the dark vehicle, studying the property as though confirming something she had already suspected. Claire stepped away from the window. Please tell me powerful council members regularly visit random bookstores managers in the mountains. They do not, Ethan said. Nathaniel looked toward the hallway. She cannot see me. Claire folded her arms. Then I answer the door. Claire, it is my house. Nathaniel recognized the tone. He had heard it when she ordered him off the sofa, and arguing had not worked then either. Do not tell her anything. I was planning to give her your entire biography. Nathaniel gave her a warning look. Claire pointed toward the back room. Go. Ethan followed him out of sight just as someone knocked. Claire waited several seconds before opening the door. Vanessa stood beneath the porch light wearing an elegant charcoal coat, perfectly composed despite the snow around her expensive boots. Claire Bennett. That depends on who is asking. Vanessa smiled politely. Vanessa Crow. I serve on the Blackwood Council. That sounds important. Occasionally. Vanessa glanced past Claire into the cabin. I apologize for arriving without notice. We are searching this area for Alpha King Nathaniel Blackwood. Claire kept her expression neutral. I saw that on the news. Have you noticed anything unusual recently? Claire thought about the enormous wolf demanding steak, occupying her sofa, understanding English, and eventually becoming a king in her living room. Define unusual. Vanessa studied her. Strangers. Vehicles. Animals behaving strangely. Claire noticed the last word. Animals. His Majesty disappeared near the western boundary. We are considering every possibility. I saw a deer yesterday. Vanessa did not smile. Any wolves? Claire leaned against the doorframe. This is Colorado. For the first time, Vanessa's composure tightened. A particular wolf. Large. Black coat. Blue eyes. Claire felt her pulse quicken, but her voice remained casual. You seem to have a very specific description. Vanessa recovered quickly. Search teams reported tracks. That answer arrived too smoothly. Claire remembered the snowstorm. Any tracks near the western boundary should have been covered long before Vanessa reached Pine Haven. I have not seen anything worth reporting, Claire said. Vanessa looked past her once more. If you do, contact the council directly. She handed Claire a card. The Alpha King's safety may depend on it. Claire accepted the card. Of course. Vanessa returned to her vehicle and drove away. Claire waited until the headlights disappeared before closing the door. Nathaniel and Ethan emerged from the hallway. She knows about the wolf, Claire said. Yes, Nathaniel replied. But how? Ethan looked troubled. The official search has never released details about your shifted form. Claire placed Vanessa's card on the table. She also said search teams found tracks near the western boundary. Nathaniel looked at her. The storm erased those tracks before official teams arrived. Silence followed. Ethan picked up the card. She knows more than she should. Nathaniel's attention remained on Claire. You handled that well. I manage a bookstore. You would be surprised how often people lie about returning damaged books. Ethan laughed. Nathaniel almost did. Claire sat at the table. There is something else. She asked about animals before she asked about wolves. She was trying to make the question sound casual. Ethan nodded slowly. She came here looking for confirmation. Nathaniel looked toward the dark window. Which means someone traced my movement south. Claire studied him. You said earlier that you did not know why you came to my cabin. Nathaniel became quiet. That was not entirely true. Claire's expression changed. Ethan immediately found the documents on the table extremely interesting. Explain. Nathaniel took a slow breath. When I was trapped in wolf form, instinct became stronger than reason. I followed something familiar. We had never met. No, then what was familiar? Nathaniel met her eyes. You. Claire stared at him. That does not explain anything. Your scent felt safe. The words sounded almost uncomfortable for him to admit. Claire stood straighter. Do not turn this into some destiny speech where the universe decided my life without consulting me. I am not. Nathaniel answered immediately. My instincts chose your porch. That does not mean they choose anything for you. Claire watched him carefully. Good. Nathaniel nodded. Whatever this connection is, you decide what it means to you. Something shifted quietly between them. Not a claim. Not a promise. Respect. Claire looked toward the sofa where a lost wolf had spent 3 nights pretending not to understand her. For the record, choosing my porch was still terrible judgment. Nathaniel's mouth curved slightly. You let me inside. Temporary weakness. Ethan's phone suddenly vibrated. He read the message and looked up. The emergency vote has been moved forward. Nathaniel's expression hardened. When? 1 hour. Claire looked between them. Nathaniel reached for the dark coat Ethan had brought. The quiet man who had stood in her kitchen disappeared beneath the authority of the Alpha King. Then it is time, he said. Claire expected him to leave without another word. Instead, Nathaniel stopped beside the door and looked back at her. Claire, none of this gives me any right to decide your future. She held his gaze. I know, but I would trust you beside me. Claire looked at Vanessa's card on the table, then at the man she had once called grumpy because she believed he was simply a difficult stray. Then you had better find me a coat, she said. 40 minutes later, Claire understood exactly why Nathaniel had never looked comfortable being called powerful. The Blackwood Council chamber was enormous, polished, and cold enough to make her small bookstore feel like another universe. 12 council members sat around a long dark table beneath tall windows overlooking the snow-covered mountains. At the head of the room, Vanessa Crowe stood preparing to begin the emergency vote. The Northern Territories require stability, she said. Until His Majesty is found, temporary leadership must be established. The doors opened behind her. Every person in the chamber turned. Nathaniel entered first. Silence fell instantly. Claire walked beside Ethan several steps behind him, wearing the simple dark winter coat Ethan had found for her. Vanessa's face lost its carefully controlled expression for less than a second. Claire noticed. Nathaniel noticed too. I appreciate everyone's concern for my absence, Nathaniel said calmly. However, replacing me seems premature. Several council members stood at once. Questions filled the chamber, but Nathaniel raised one hand, and the room became quiet again. Claire almost smiled. 3 days earlier, this same man had refused dog food and hidden from her vacuum cleaner. Now 12 powerful people waited for permission to speak. Vanessa recovered first. Your Majesty, thank goodness you are safe. I am. Where have you been? Nathaniel looked directly at her. Recovering. Vanessa's eyes moved toward Claire. And who is this? Before Nathaniel could answer, Claire spoke. Claire Bennett. Vanessa waited for more. Claire offered none. Miss Bennett was the person who found me, Nathaniel said. A councilman near the end of the table frowned. Found you. Ethan placed copies of the altered inspection schedules before the council. His Majesty's official route was changed shortly before his disappearance. The room shifted immediately. Vanessa remained composed. Surely you are not suggesting a council member was responsible. No one has made that accusation, Claire said. Vanessa turned toward her. I do not believe this discussion requires the opinion of an outsider. Claire felt every eye in the room settle on her. Nathaniel said nothing. He did not rescue her from the moment. Somehow, Claire appreciated that. You are right, she said. I am an outsider, which is probably why I noticed something everyone familiar with this system overlooked. She walked toward the table and pointed to the handwritten notation beside the altered route. This symbol is different from the standard routing mark. One council member leaned forward. That is impossible. Ethan placed another document beside it. We verified it. The altered notation matches records prepared through Councilwoman Crow's private scheduling office. Vanessa's expression hardened. My office processes hundreds of documents. That proves nothing. I agree, Claire said. Vanessa seemed surprised. Then why are you here? Claire looked directly at her. Because yesterday you came to my cabin asking whether I had seen a large black wolf with blue eyes. The chamber became completely silent. Vanessa's face changed again. This time, everyone noticed. Claire continued. The public was never told what form the Alpha King was trapped in. According to Ethan, neither were the official search teams. Vanessa looked toward Nathaniel. I received confidential information. From whom? He asked. She hesitated. Only briefly, but it was enough. Claire remembered something else. You also claimed search teams found wolf tracks near the western boundary. Ethan turned sharply toward Vanessa. No tracks were recovered. The snowstorm covered them before our teams arrived. Council members began exchanging quiet looks. Vanessa straightened. This is speculation based on the word of an Omega who has no understanding of council affairs. Claire felt the insult land, but before Nathaniel could speak, she answered calmly. My status does not change what you said on my porch. Nathaniel's gaze shifted toward Claire with unmistakable respect. An older councilwoman examined the documents again. Miss Bennett is correct. These inconsistencies require investigation. Another member nodded. Vanessa looked around the table and realized the room was no longer following her. Nathaniel finally stepped forward. The emergency vote is suspended. Ethan will oversee an independent review of all scheduling records connected to my disappearance. Vanessa's eyes moved toward Claire. And she remains here? Nathaniel looked at Claire before answering. Only if she chooses to. The distinction seemed to surprise everyone except Claire. I will stay until I finish giving my statement, she said. Then I decide what happens next. Nathaniel nodded once. No command. No claim. The council meeting ended 30 minutes later, but as Claire followed Ethan into the corridor, she heard two council members speaking quietly behind her. One asked why the Alpha King trusted an unknown Omega so completely. The other answered with a word Claire had heard before, but never expected to hear connected to herself. Mate. Claire stopped walking. Across the corridor, Nathaniel had heard it too. Their eyes met, and for the first time since leaving the cabin, the Alpha King looked genuinely uncertain. Claire waited until they reached an empty sitting room before turning to Nathaniel. Mate. Nathaniel closed the door behind them, but remained several feet away. It is a possibility. That sounds suspiciously different from what you told me yesterday. It is not. Claire folded her arms. Your instincts led you to my cabin. You recognized something about me before we had ever met. Now your counsel is whispering that I am your mate. And none of that gives me authority over you. His answer came without hesitation. Claire studied him. Then what does mate actually mean? Nathaniel considered the question carefully. For some, it means destiny. For others, compatibility. I have always believed it means potential. Potential for what? Something two people still have to choose. Claire's shoulders relaxed slightly. That answer was almost reasonable. I have occasional moments. Do not become overconfident. A quiet smile appeared on his face, but it disappeared when voices approached outside. Ethan entered with several council members behind him. Vanessa followed last. The review has already uncovered additional irregularities, Ethan said. We need both of you back in the chamber. Minutes later, Claire stood again beneath the attention of the entire council. Vanessa appeared less composed than before, but her voice remained sharp. Before this continues, I believe we should address the obvious conflict surrounding Miss Bennett. Claire frowned. What conflict? Vanessa looked toward Nathaniel. His Majesty disappeared and returned 3 days later with an unknown Omega. Now he allows her to participate in confidential council matters. I provided evidence, Claire said. You provided observations. Accurate ones. Vanessa ignored her. Perhaps the council should ask why the Alpha King is protecting her so aggressively. A councilman shifted uncomfortably. Are you suggesting a claim has been made? The question changed the room. Claire felt every gaze turned toward Nathaniel. Vanessa's expression sharpened, as if she had finally found the argument she wanted. Exactly. If Miss Bennett has been claimed, then her judgment cannot be considered independent. Nathaniel stood slowly. She has not been claimed. Claire felt an unexpected sting at the words, though she immediately hated herself for it. Vanessa smiled. Then she is simply an outsider with no standing here. Nathaniel's eyes became cold. You misunderstood me. Vanessa's smile faded. Nathaniel looked around the chamber. Claire Bennett does not belong to me. The silence deepened. She is not property. She is not a political advantage. She is not an extension of my authority. Claire stared at him. Nathaniel continued, his voice calm enough that no one could mistake the certainty behind it. If anyone in this room insists on describing what happened between us in terms of belonging, then understand this clearly. I was the stray wolf who appeared on her porch. She opened her home when she believed I had nothing to offer her. She fed me, sheltered me, and protected my identity before she knew my title. Ethan looked down, clearly hiding a smile. Nathaniel glanced toward Claire. So if anyone belongs anywhere, I am the one who walked into her life and refused to leave. For one stunned second, nobody spoke. Claire felt warmth rise to her face. Vanessa recovered first. A charming speech does not give her political standing. No, Claire said, but your own records do. Ethan placed a new document on the table. The review found that the account used to alter His Majesty's route was accessed from Councilwoman Crow's private office terminal. Vanessa went still. Anyone could have entered my office. Possibly, Ethan replied, which is why we checked the building access records. He placed another page beside the first. Your identification was used to enter the office 17 minutes before the schedule changed. No other entry was recorded until the following morning. Vanessa looked around the table. This proves I was present. Nothing more. Claire studied the documents, then remembered Vanessa standing on her porch. You knew he was a wolf. Vanessa turned toward her. Claire continued. Not just that he had shifted. You knew his coat color and his eyes. If your plan was only political, how did you know exactly what happened to him? Nathaniel's expression changed. Ethan looked sharply at Vanessa. For the first time, genuine fear appeared behind her composure. Claire understood immediately. There is another person involved, she said. Vanessa said nothing. Nathaniel stepped closer to the table. Who? Vanessa looked toward the closed chamber doors. Then she whispered, You are asking the wrong question. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. Vanessa looked directly at him. You should be asking why they wanted you trapped as a wolf instead of simply gone. The council chamber remained silent after Vanessa's warning. Nathaniel watched her carefully, but Claire noticed something different. Vanessa was no longer looking like a woman defending herself. She looked like someone who had finally realized the people behind her plan had already abandoned her. Who are they? Nathaniel asked. Vanessa glanced around the table. I was promised temporary leadership. Nothing more. Ethan stepped closer to the documents. By whom? Vanessa hesitated. A private group operating through several regional businesses. They wanted access to Blackwood land negotiations while the council was divided. Nathaniel's expression remained controlled. And trapping me in wolf form accomplished that. You were supposed to disappear for 2 weeks. Long enough for the council to appoint an acting ruler and approve several agreements before you returned. Claire frowned. Then why did you visit my cabin? Vanessa looked at her. Because the people who arranged the disruption told me you had been tracked south. The dark vehicle, Claire said. Vanessa nodded reluctantly. I was told to confirm whether you had found him. Ethan immediately began reviewing the records again. Names. I never met them directly. Nathaniel's gaze hardened. You altered my route based on instructions from people you never met. Vanessa looked away. I wanted the council seat. Claire understood the simplicity beneath everything. Vanessa had not needed to hate Nathaniel. Ambition had been enough. Ethan spent the next hour working with the council's independent security team. Financial transfers connected Vanessa's private office to a consulting company that had quietly purchased interests in land near the western boundary. The same company had requested meetings regarding development rights months earlier and had been refused by Nathaniel. The mystery that had seemed enormous began collapsing into something painfully ordinary. Money, influence, opportunity. By evening, The council voted unanimously to suspend Vanessa from all authority while an independent investigation continued. She left the chamber without another word. Nathaniel did not celebrate. Claire found him later standing alone near a tall window overlooking the mountains. "You won," she said. "This does not feel like winning. Probably because you spent 3 days sleeping on my sofa." He looked at her. "You are never going to forget that." "Absolutely not." His smile was brief. Claire moved beside the window, leaving comfortable space between them. "What happens now?" "The investigation continues. The council returns to normal operations. Ethan becomes unbearable because he was right about several security concerns." "I heard that." Ethan called from somewhere down the corridor. Claire smiled, but the feeling faded quickly. "I meant what happens to me." Nathaniel became quiet. "Whatever you choose." She looked at him. "That is a very careful answer. It is the only fair one. And if I go home tomorrow?" Something shifted in his eyes. "Then I make certain no one follows you, and I let you go home." Just like that. "Claire, I meant what I said in the council chamber. Whatever exists between us cannot become another form of obligation." She studied his face. 3 days earlier, she had believed he was an unusually judgmental wolf. Now she knew he was a king surrounded by people who expected something from him every hour of his life. Perhaps that was why her cabin had felt safe. She had expected nothing because she had known nothing. "What if the mate thing is real?" she asked. "Then it will still be real tomorrow, whether you are standing beside me or 50 miles away." Claire looked toward the mountains. "You really believe that?" "I have spent my entire life being told what duty requires. I will not use destiny to do the same thing to you." For a moment, Claire wanted to stay. That realization frightened her more than anything Vanessa had done. She had known Nathaniel for only 3 days as a wolf and barely 1 day as a man. Yet somehow, the silence beside him already felt familiar. "I need to go home," she said. Nathaniel's face remained composed, but she saw the disappointment. "I know. I need to know whether I miss you or whether I miss the impossible situation we survived together." "That is reasonable." "Stop being reasonable. It makes leaving harder." Nathaniel almost laughed. The next morning, Ethan drove Claire back to Pine Haven. Nathaniel stood at the entrance as the car pulled away, but he did not ask her to stay. Hours later, Claire unlocked her cabin and stepped into the quiet living room. The sofa was empty. The water bowl still sat near the kitchen. She stared at it longer than she wanted to admit. Then she noticed something on the cushion where Grumpy had always slept. A folded piece of paper. Claire opened it. Nathaniel had written only one sentence. "You opened the door when you thought I was nobody. Whatever happens next, I will never forget that." Claire sat slowly on the sofa. For the first time since bringing home a stray wolf, the cabin felt far too quiet. For the next 4 weeks, Claire discovered that missing someone was much more inconvenient than she had expected. She returned to managing the bookstore in Pine Haven, reopened the cabin windows when the weather warmed, and removed the water bowl from the kitchen floor after spending 3 embarrassing days pretending she had forgotten it was there. Her life became normal again. That was the problem. Every time the front bell rang at the bookstore, some unreasonable part of her expected Nathaniel to walk through the door. Every time she cooked steak, she remembered a black wolf staring at her plate as though starvation had suddenly become a royal emergency. Even the vacuum cleaner felt less entertaining without an offended audience. Nathaniel did not visit. He sent no dramatic messages and made no attempt to convince her that destiny had already made her decision. Once a week, however, a simple envelope arrived at the bookstore. The first contained a photograph of her old gray sweatshirt folded neatly inside a package with a note promising its return. The second contained an official invoice for 1 replacement sofa cushion, marked paid in full. Claire laughed so loudly that 2 customers looked up from the mystery section. The third envelope contained nothing except a handwritten question. "How is the bookstore?" Claire stared at those 4 words for nearly 10 minutes before replying. "Still standing." "How is the kingdom?" His answer arrived 2 days later. "More complicated than your bookstore. Less dangerous than your vacuum cleaner." That was how they began speaking again. Not as an alpha king and his supposed mate. Not as a woman caught inside a political crisis. Just Claire and Nate. Their messages remained ordinary. He told her Ethan had introduced new security procedures and was enjoying every second of being proven correct. She told him Sarah still believed the mysterious wolf had returned to the wilderness. He asked what she was reading. She asked whether kings ever took days off. Apparently, they did not. Slowly, Claire realized what she had needed to know. She did not miss the danger. She did not miss the council chamber or the mystery surrounding his disappearance. She missed him. She missed the way he listened before answering serious questions. She missed the rare smile that appeared when he forgot to be guarded. Most embarrassingly, she missed Grumpy. One Friday evening, Claire closed the bookstore early and drove back to her cabin beneath a sky filled with late winter stars. She carried groceries inside, made dinner, and sat on the sofa with a book she had been trying to finish for 2 weeks. She read the same paragraph 4 times. Finally, she closed it. "This is ridiculous," she told the empty room. Someone scratched at the front door. Claire froze. The sound came again. Slow, deliberate, familiar. She stood and crossed the room, telling herself there were dozens of reasonable explanations. None survived when she opened the door. A massive black wolf sat beneath the porch light. Healthy, dry, completely calm. Pale blue eyes watched her with unmistakable amusement. Claire stared at him. No one ear moved. Absolutely not. The wolf remained seated. "You have an entire kingdom." He tilted his head. "You have a castle." "Nothing." "You probably own several sofas." The wolf looked past her into the cabin. Claire followed his gaze toward her old brown sofa. "Do not even think about it." He stood. Claire blocked the doorway. "Why are you here?" The wolf simply waited. Then Claire understood. Nathaniel had returned in the same form in which she had first known him, but everything was different now. He was not lost. He was not trapped. He did not need rescue. He had chosen to come. Claire looked into those familiar blue eyes. "You could have called." The wolf blinked. "You could have driven here like a normal person." His expression suggested that normal had never been part of their relationship. Claire tried not to smile. "If I let you inside, there are rules." The wolf sat again. "No stealing my steak." One ear shifted. "No taking the entire sofa." His eyes moved toward the living room. "And tomorrow, you explain why the Alpha King traveled 50 miles just to sit on my porch pretending he cannot talk." The wolf looked directly at her. Claire stepped aside. "Fine." Nathaniel walked into the cabin with unmistakable satisfaction. Claire closed the door behind him. "Do not make me regret this, Grumpy." He stopped and looked back at her. This time, instead of appearing offended, the Alpha King lowered his head as though accepting the name. Then he walked straight to the sofa. Claire stared after him. "I knew it." Nathaniel climbed onto his old cushion and settled down. Claire folded her arms, but she was smiling now. For weeks earlier, she had needed to know whether she could return to her ordinary life without him. Standing in the cabin that no longer felt empty, Claire finally had her answer. She could. She simply was not certain she wanted to. Claire woke the next morning to the smell of coffee and the unsettling realization that someone was moving around her kitchen. She sat up quickly, remembered the enormous wolf on her sofa, and walked into the living room. The sofa was empty again. "We need to establish a warning system for this," she called. Nathaniel stood in the kitchen wearing the clothes he had apparently carried in a small pack hidden near the porch. He turned from the coffee maker. "Good morning. Yesterday you were a wolf. I remember. Normal guests knock and remain the same species overnight. I have never claimed to be a normal guest." Claire looked at the 2 coffee mugs on the counter. "Why are you here, Nate?" He became quiet. There was no council chamber around them now, no emergency requiring her help, and no mystery giving either of them an excuse to avoid the question. "Because 4 weeks was enough time for me to understand something." Claire waited. Nathaniel rested his hands against the counter. "When I first came here, I needed somewhere safe. Last night, I came because I wanted to be here. Those are different things." Completely. Claire accepted the coffee he offered her. And the kingdom? Still there. The council? Still argumentative. Ethan? Insufferably pleased with the new security system. Claire smiled. Good for him. Nathaniel watched her carefully. "Claire, I am not asking you to move to Blackwood." Her smile faded into surprise. "You are not." "No, I am not asking you to leave your bookstore, your cabin, or the life you built before meeting me." "Then what are you asking?" Nathaniel took a slow breath. "Whether there is room in that life for me." The simplicity of the question caught her completely unprepared. "You are an Alpha King." "Unfortunately, yes. You cannot exactly disappear every weekend and become a stray wolf. Ethan has strongly discouraged that plan." Claire laughed, then looked down at her coffee. "People will talk. They already do." Your council will have expectations. They always do. And the mate bond. Nathaniel's expression softened. It changes nothing unless we choose to let it mean something. Claire looked at him. You really came 50 miles to tell me that. I also wanted my sofa. My sofa. We may need a council ruling. You would lose. Nathaniel smiled, but neither of them moved away from the real conversation. Claire had spent 4 weeks proving she could live without him. Nathaniel had spent those same weeks proving he would respect the distance she requested. Now there was no crisis left to decide for them. I missed you, Claire finally said. Nathaniel became completely still. I missed you too. I even missed Grumpy. That is less flattering. Grumpy has better manners. Grumpy ate your steak. Exactly. He communicated his intentions clearly. Nathaniel laughed, and Claire realized how rarely she had heard that sound. She placed her mug on the counter. I am not promising to become whatever your council thinks an Alpha King's mate should be. I would never ask you to. I am keeping my bookstore. Good. And this cabin? Definitely. Claire narrowed her eyes. Because of the sofa? Primarily. She smiled. Then maybe there is room. Nathaniel did not reach for her or turn the moment into a claim. He simply looked at her as though those 5 words meant more than any public declaration could have. Maybe, he asked. Do not push your luck. Later that afternoon, they drove into Pine Haven together. Claire opened the bookstore while Nathaniel quietly helped carry a shipment of new books from the back room. Nobody bowed. Nobody called him Your Majesty. For several hours, he was simply Nate, the tall, slightly serious man Claire had brought with her. Near closing time, Sarah walked through the door, stopped, and stared at him. You look familiar. Claire nearly dropped the books in her hands. Nathaniel remained perfectly calm. Sarah studied his blue eyes for another second before looking at Claire. Wait. Claire held her breath. Sarah pointed at Nathaniel. Is this why you never called Wildlife Services back? Nathaniel looked toward Claire with unmistakable amusement. Claire closed her eyes. This conversation is going to take a while. That evening, as they drove back toward the cabin beneath the fading Colorado sunset, Claire realized something had changed. Nathaniel was no longer a mystery she needed to solve, and she was no longer a refuge he needed to hide inside. For the first time, they were simply 2 people choosing the same road. And somewhere between Pine Haven and the cabin, Claire reached across the center console and placed her hand beside his. Nathaniel looked down, then at her. He waited. Claire closed the remaining distance herself and took his hand. 3 months later, Claire was standing behind the counter of her bookstore when the front bell rang and 6 members of the Blackwood Council walked inside. She looked at Nathaniel, who was arranging books near the history section with suspicious concentration. Did you know about this? Possibly. Nate. Yes. Claire sighed. The council had changed since Vanessa's removal. Independent investigators had uncovered the remaining financial connections behind the scheme, new security rules had been established, and Nathaniel had made certain no single council office could secretly alter confidential travel records again. But the greatest change had happened outside the council chamber. Nathaniel divided his time between Blackwood and Pine Haven. Claire occasionally visited the castle, attended meetings when she genuinely had something to contribute, and returned home whenever she wanted. No one decided her schedule except Claire. Some people still called her the Alpha King's mate. Others expected a formal announcement. Claire ignored both groups. She and Nathaniel were building something at their own pace, and for once, the world could wait. The oldest councilwoman approached the counter and smiled. Miss Bennett, we were hoping to speak with you about establishing literacy programs in several northern communities. Claire looked at Nathaniel. You brought the council to my bookstore? You said you would not move your life to Blackwood. So you moved Blackwood into my bookstore? Temporarily. Claire tried not to smile. You are impossible. I have been told. The meeting lasted 2 hours and ended with Claire agreeing to help design the program without accepting any official title. After the council members left, she locked the door and found Nathaniel sitting on the reading room sofa. You know, she said, you have developed a concerning relationship with sofas. I spent 3 days learning their importance. Claire sat beside him. Do you ever regret coming to my porch? Nathaniel looked genuinely surprised. Not once. Even when I named you Grumpy. That remains under review. Claire laughed. Nathaniel reached into his coat pocket and placed a small silver key on the table. She looked at it. What is that? A key to my private residence at Blackwood. Claire raised an eyebrow. That sounds dangerously symbolic. It is only a key. Nothing involving an alpha king is ever only anything. Nathaniel smiled. Then consider it an invitation. You can use it whenever you choose. Or never. Claire picked it up. No expectations? None. She reached into her own bag and placed another key beside his. Nathaniel stared at it. Your cabin. Do not look so surprised. You already behave like you own the sofa. I knew patience would eventually reward me. That is not what this means. Of course not. Claire leaned back, smiling. Outside, evening settled over Pine Haven, turning the mountain sky gold and blue. Their lives had not merged into one perfect story. Claire still opened the bookstore every morning. Nathaniel still returned to Blackwood when his responsibilities required him. Some nights they stayed at the cabin. Others they spent apart. Love had not erased who they were. It had simply given them somewhere they both wanted to return. Later that evening, Claire arrived home first and found a familiar black wolf waiting on the porch. She stopped beside the steps. You drove here, shifted somewhere in the woods, and came back just to make a dramatic entrance, did you not? The wolf looked innocent. You are 34 years old. One ear moved. Claire opened the door. Fine. Come inside. Nathaniel immediately walked toward the living room. Claire followed and found him settling across the entire sofa. Absolutely not. We discussed this. The wolf closed his eyes. That is still my seat. Nothing. Claire sat beside him and rested a hand against his thick black coat. You know, technically, I never actually adopted you. One blue eye opened. Claire smiled. You just refused to leave. Later, when Nathaniel returned to human form, he looked at her across the quiet room. For the record, I could have gone anywhere that night. Claire understood what he meant. But you came here. Yes. And now? Nathaniel looked around the small cabin before meeting her eyes again. Now I know why. Claire waited. His answer was simple. Home. She took his hand. In the end, Claire had never belonged to an alpha king, and Nathaniel had never needed to claim an omega. She had opened a door. He had chosen to return. And every day after that, they kept choosing each other.